The first spark was not from the wires but from the rage in my chest when I saw the darkened rooms of my home, every lamp lifeless, every appliance silenced in the middle of a sweltering summer evening. My daughter was standing in the kitchen, clutching a melted popsicle, tears streaking her cheeks as the freezer beeped its low-power warning. My wife, who relied on a medical cooling unit for her portable oxygen system, looked at me with the kind of dread no man should ever have to see in his family's eyes. And outside, standing like a self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac with scissors in hand and a smirk plastered across her smug face, was Karen, the HOA president who had made our lives hell since the day we moved in. She waved those heavy garden shears like a trophy, strands of copper wire dangling from the blades, sparks still flickering from where she had just severed my main power connection. Her words sliced colder than the sudden silence of the house. "You don't get to run your little workshop here. It's against HOA code. Consider this your lesson." At that moment, fury surged hotter than the July air. I had tolerated her nasty letters stuffed under my door, the fines she tried to levy for my flagpole, the endless complaints about the way I parked my truck. But this was sabotage. This was life-endangering. I stepped toward her, heart pounding, voice steady only because rage had carved it into steel. "You just cut power to a medical device," I told her. "That's a felony." She laughed, tilting her head like I was some silly neighbor throwing a tantrum. "Call whoever you want," she sneered. "I run this neighborhood. The HOA stands with me." But fate didn't stand with her, not this time. As she strutted away, leaving the wires strewn like veins torn from the earth, headlights washed across the street. A sheriff's patrol car rolled to a stop at the edge of my driveway. Deputy Lawson stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of man who carried authority without needing to bark it. He didn't just see me. He saw the crime scene, the exposed wires, the tool still clutched in Karen's hand. And though she froze for a second, she quickly put on her saccharine smile, greeting him as if he were a guest at her tea party. "Oh, officer," she cooed. "Just dealing with a code violator here." What she didn't know was that Lawson was my cousin. We weren't close enough for barbecues, but close enough that he knew the truth about my wife's condition. Close enough that he'd heard my rants about this HOA president who thought she was above the law. His eyes scanned the scene, then flicked back to me. He asked quietly, "You okay, Dan?" That question was more than a courtesy, it was permission. A signal that he saw what was happening and he wasn't buying her act. Karen puffed up, pointing her finger at me like a judge slamming a gavel. "He's in violation of HOA Code number 12, operating an unauthorized facility. He thinks he can ignore me. Well, I showed him." I looked straight at Lawson and then at the wires. "She cut my power line, Sheriff. My wife's oxygen depends on that unit. This isn't an HOA matter. This is criminal damage, reckless endangerment." For the first time that night, Karen's smile faltered. She opened her mouth to spin another lie, but Lawson raised a hand. He didn't cuff her, not yet. Instead, he pulled out his phone, snapped photos of the wires, the shears, the blackened scorch marks. Karen's protests grew shrill, claiming it was all staged, that I had sabotaged my own power to frame her. But the evidence sang louder than her excuses. That's when the idea struck me. Call it fury, call it poetic justice, call it a lifetime of discipline from my military service boiling over into one precise strike. I asked Lawson for a minute. He nodded, watching carefully. I went to my shed, grabbed my heavy-duty extension cables, and without a word began splicing them into the very wires she had cut. Karen started shrieking, demanding I stop, warning me about lawsuits, about consequences. I ignored her. My hands moved with methodical calm, each connection wrapped tight, every copper strand bound with electrical tape. Then, in one swift motion, I rerouted the current not back into my house, but into hers. Her porch lights flickered on. Her air conditioner roared alive. Her living room lit up brighter than Times Square, every socket surging with the power she had tried to steal from me. For a moment she looked confused, staring at her glowing windows. Then she realized what I had done. Her face drained of color, replaced by a storm of panic. "You can't do that," she screamed. "That's illegal." Her words cut off as Lawson barked a laugh, the kind you couldn't fake. "Illegal?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Lady, you cut his lines first. What you're looking at is what we call poetic justice." The neighbors had gathered by then, drawn by the commotion, their cell phones out, recording everything. Some had suffered Karen's tyranny: 2 fines for Christmas lights, threats over garden gnomes, citations for garage sales. Their smirks told me I wasn't alone anymore. One even clapped. Another whispered, "Finally." Karen, frantic, tried to storm into her own house, but the sheriff stopped her. "Not so fast," Lawson said, his voice heavy as thunder. "You just tampered with utility infrastructure. That's a serious crime. And if what he says about his wife's medical device is true, you put lives at risk tonight." She stammered, pointing wildly at me, insisting I was dangerous, that I was unhinged. But her words bounced off the glow of her own lit-up home, powered by the very crime she had committed. The twist came when a quiet voice spoke from the edge of the crowd. It was old Mr. Alvarez, the retired lineman who had lived here since before the HOA was founded. He stepped forward with slow, deliberate dignity, holding his union badge like a relic of truth. "I saw her cut those wires," he said, voice trembling but firm. "I saw her march up with those shears and snap them clean. She's been threatening people here for years. Tonight, she went too far." That testimony was the nail in her coffin. The sheriff didn't hesitate after that. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists, silencing the last of her excuses. The crowd gasped, then cheered. For once, the power Karen wielded wasn't HOA bylaws or empty threats. It was the humiliation of being caught, the weight of justice pulling her down in front of the very neighbors she claimed to rule. And as I stood there in the glow of her house lit by my redirected wires, holding my wife's hand while she breathed steady again, I realized this wasn't just revenge. It was a turning point. We had lived too long under her reign of intimidation. Tonight, with the sheriff watching and the neighbors filming, the spell was broken. Karen's shrieks echoed down the street as Lawson guided her toward the patrol car, her wrists secured in cold steel cuffs that clinked with every flailing gesture. She tried to twist away, demanding that he release her, insisting she was the victim, but the neighbors' phones told a different story. The glow of their screens was like a wall of judgment, and every second of her tantrum was being captured, preserved, ready to live forever on social media. For a moment I just stood there, the heavy extension cables still warm in my hands, the hum of electricity thrumming faintly through the lines that fed her house instead of mine. My wife's cooling unit buzzed to life again now that I'd reconnected our main breaker, her breathing easing with every second. Relief surged through me like a tide, but behind it came something deeper, heavier: a need for this not just to end, but to end in a way that no one could ever mistake again who was right and who had been wrong. Karen wasn't finished fighting. From the back of the patrol car, her voice carried out the window. "You people don't understand. I am the HOA. Without me, this neighborhood falls apart. I'm protecting your property values. You're all going to regret this." Her words grew shriller, each syllable fueled by desperation. But the crowd didn't flinch. They were tired, beaten down by years of her reign. Tonight, they saw her for what she was: not a protector, but a tyrant who finally pushed too far. Lawson leaned against the hood of his car, calm as stone. He didn't rush the process. He let her stew in the silence between her own screams, let the weight of every eye on the block sink into her pride. Then he radioed dispatch, his voice measured. "Need transport for a suspect in custody. Charges: criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, tampering with utilities. Possible additional charges pending." The street erupted in murmurs. Some neighbors clapped, others gasped at the list of charges. But I noticed one figure slipping quietly through the crowd: Gene, Karen's right-hand man on the HOA board. For years he had been her shadow, the one who signed off on her fines, who enforced her edicts with smug little notes taped to garage doors. He thought he could slink away unnoticed, but Alvarez stopped him. The old lineman's voice, though cracked with age, carried sharp as lightning. "Hold on there, Jean. Didn't I see you carrying the ladder for her earlier?" Jean froze, sweat breaking on his forehead. "What? No, I was just walking my dog." But the crowd turned, and someone else spoke up. "I saw him. He was with her. He was laughing while she cut those lines." Another chimed in. "He helped her drag that ladder across my yard last week." The dominoes began to fall. Jean's face drained pale, and when Lawson's eyes fixed on him, the man's composure cracked. He bolted, but Lawson was faster. One sharp command, one long stride, and Jean was face down on the grass, his hands yanked behind him. The crowd roared, some cheering, others shouting in outrage. Karen screamed from the patrol car, "Jean, don't say anything. Don't you dare." But it was too late. The fear of a cornered coward broke him, and the words spilled from his mouth like floodwater. "It was all her idea. She told me to help. She said nobody could stop her. She said we'd make him leave." He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Lawson cuffed him, too, and the neighbors knew this wasn't just a petty feud anymore. It was a conspiracy. I felt a weight lift from my chest. For years, Karen had seemed untouchable because of the little circle of enablers she surrounded herself with, a board of cowards too afraid to challenge her. Tonight, the circle cracked. That was when a new voice joined the chaos. A woman stepped forward from the shadows near the street lamp. I recognized her, Marissa, the quiet widow from 2 houses down who had rarely been seen outside since her husband died. She carried a stack of envelopes in her arms, her hands trembling but her eyes blazing with purpose. "I think you'll want to see this," she said, handing them to Lawson. He flipped through the pages, his expression tightening with every sheet. They were forged HOA letters, threats, fake fines, notices of violations that had never been voted on, never approved, never legal. Some demanded hundreds of dollars for unauthorized lawn furniture. Others threatened liens on homes for minor infractions. And every single one bore Karen's signature. The neighbors gasped, voices rising like a wave. "She fined me $300 for a bird feeder," someone shouted. "She tried to evict my aunt for hanging wind chimes," cried another. The rage that had simmered for years now boiled over, and I saw it in their eyes. They weren't just angry. They were ready to stand together. Lawson tucked the evidence under his arm, his jaw set. He looked at me, then at the crowd. "Looks like we've got more than one case here. Fraud, extortion, maybe even racketeering, depending on how far this goes." His words were heavy, deliberate, and every neighbor knew what they meant. Karen hadn't just overstepped. She had built her little empire on lies and intimidation. And now the walls were crumbling. Karen thrashed in the back of the car, her screams rising to a hysterical pitch. "No, those letters were legal. I'm the president. I had authority." But no one believed her anymore. Not even Jean, who now sat slumped on the curb, defeated, his betrayal complete. The sheriff's transport van arrived, and as they loaded Karen inside, her final shriek cut through the night. "You'll all regret this. Without me, this place will fall apart." But instead of fear, laughter rippled through the crowd. The spell was broken. In the days that followed, the fallout spread fast. News crews arrived, footage from the neighbors' phones went viral, and suddenly our little cul-de-sac was a headline. HOA president arrested for cutting neighbors' power lines. Commentators debated it on TV, reporters camped on corners, and across the country people who had suffered under tyrannical HOAs cheered from their living rooms. The county launched a full investigation into the HOA board. Fraudulent fines were voided, illegally collected money had to be returned, and one by one the board members resigned, their reputations in ruins. For the first time in years, our neighborhood breathed freely. Children played in yards without fear of citations. Families decorated their porches however they pleased. And for the first time, neighbors actually spoke to one another like friends instead of prisoners under surveillance. As for me, I was asked to step in as interim president until a proper election could be held. I didn't want the power, but I accepted not to rule, but to protect. We rewrote the bylaws together, this time with real transparency. Every rule was voted on, every voice heard. The HOA became what it was supposed to be, a group of neighbors working for one another, not against. Karen tried to fight from jail. She filed motions, hired lawyers, even wrote letters proclaiming herself the true president. But the law was clear now, and so was the will of the community. The last I heard, she was facing multiple felony charges and a lawsuit from several families she had extorted. Sometimes I still look at the spot where she cut my lines, the copper patched and sealed, humming with steady current. It reminds me that power isn't in the wires, or in titles, or in threats. It's in standing up, in speaking truth when fear tells you to stay silent, in choosing to protect your family and your neighbors no matter the cost. That night, I didn't just connect electricity to her house. I connected a neighborhood back to itself. And maybe, in some strange way, Karen gave us the gift of finally seeing the truth by showing us how dangerous it is when power is left unchecked. So what do you think? Was I right to reroute those lines and let her house glow with the proof of her crime? Or did I cross a line of my own? Share your thoughts. I want to hear where you stand.